Alright guys, what's going on? Totally different view today. Today, instead of using the webcam or the GoPro, today we're at my desktop. This computer obviously is where I do a lot of my online work for clients when I do their diets and everything. And what I'm going to do today is I'm going to show you guys how you guys can set up your diet. Just so you are aware, this is specifically for bodybuilders slash power lifters, physique athletes, that kind of sort. This is going to be a little bit different than how I would do a diet for what I call a health and wellness client, someone who's just trying to lose a couple pounds for their uh, class reunion or something. So this is just going to be for specifically tailored to bodybuilders or people who are trying to gain muscle or lose fat and keep their muscle retention while they're doing so. So what you're going to see is there's going to be a lot of math in this video, but that's just kind of how everything goes. This particular sport, to me, comes down to a lot about numbers in the gym, numbers in the kitchen, and things like that. So I'm just going to show you guys how I do everything. And so all right, let's get started. Okay, so let's take the hypothetical situation that you are 5'8", 165-pound male, and you're trying to build muscle. I say something like that because that's really common at my gym. I get a lot of people who are like they're college age. Let's also assume that this person is 20 years old, just for just an easy number to remember. 20 years old, 5'8", 165 pounds. So what we're gonna do is make a sample diet for them that puts them in a caloric surplus that allows them to build the maximum amount of muscle tissue while at the same time keeping their body fat levels at bay. So if they do decide to step on stage, they don't have to do a drastic 50-pound body fat cut to get into stage condition. So if you remember from the first video of this series, I talked about figuring out your EER, and that is going to be like the total basis of what I base everything off of on someone's diet. So if you remember the link that I put in the description of that video, this right here is going to be the particular website or link that I use to calculate or at least get a general rough estimate of someone's caloric intake. The ideal situation would be that I use this and I give them a sample diet based on a certain amount of calories, and I have them follow that meal plan specifically for a week or 2 weeks straight without deviation, without cheating, and then report to me usually once a week what their weight is. That way I can assess if the total caloric expenditure is actually higher than what this says or if it's lower than what this says. Just quick tip, if you can't go a week or 2 weeks straight without cheating on a meal plan or cheating on your diet, you're probably not cut out to be very good at this particular sport. So people always ask me, like, if I give them a meal plan and I say follow this for 2 weeks and don't cheat, and every Monday get back to me your weight so I can see if my numbers are accurate or if I need to make adjustments, whether it be higher or lower, and they ask about cheat meals and things like that, that's pretty much what I tell them. If you can't go a week or 2 weeks straight without cheating on your diet, you're probably not cut out to be very good at this sport. So what did I say? 20 years old, male, obviously. You're going to be like, no shit, Caidin, but if you're a female, make sure you click female here. Females' energy expenditure needs are significantly different than males. And if you accidentally hit male instead of female, and you are a female, you are going to get very fat very quick. Assuming they're 5'8", this particular calculator asks for their unit in inches. In case you are an idiot and you don't know how to figure out 5'8" in inches, there's 12 inches in a foot. He's 5 foot 8 inches tall. So 5 foot is 60 inches plus the extra 8 inches. He's 68 inches tall. So you can see I got 68 inches tall. That's a very common weight or a very common height for a lot of my clients. And then we use pounds because I'm in the United States and their current weight is 165 pounds. Now right here is going to be their current daily activity level. We've got sedentary, low active, active, or very active. To get a general idea of what these mean, you can read this down here. Generally, the majority of my clients fall into either the active or the low active um, energy expenditure or daily activity level area. It's very rare that I get someone who's considered very active. If I do, my cat is trying to get into the door. Piece of shit. Anyways, um, if you work like construction or something, you're gonna be right here in the very active. You're on your feet constantly daily, and you're training. You can see that a lot of these 30 to 60 minutes of moderate activity, 60 or more minutes of moderate activity, and 60 or more minutes of moderate activity plus an additional 60 minutes of vigorous activity, or 120 additional minutes of moderate activity. For me personally, I'm here in the very active range. I work 2 jobs and my workouts are very intense, so I consider myself on this range very active. But the majority of my clients are either college students or just roughly around that age. So if they do have a job, it's very rare that they're very active at it. More often than not, they're sitting for an extended period of time. So we're either going to be looking at active or low active. For this particular scenario, let's assume that the client is active, and we're just going to calculate. So you're going to see right here that we're estimated at about 3,128 calories a day. Now this is going to be what the maintenance calories are. For something like this, I keep it very simple, and I'll either round up or round down in intervals of 50. So in a case like this, instead of saying that 3,128 calories is his maintenance calories, I'm going to round up to 3,150. So I'm just going to do that for just to keep numbers very simple. I very rarely will take this exactly how it is. I'll just put this at a round up as an interval of 50. Oh. So I usually do everything through spreadsheet, and usually when I come down here, you can see meal 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, their protein source, their carb source, their fat source, and then miscellaneous. I generally use like the bottom areas here just to keep general notes while I'm doing this. So I'm going to put down here that is rough EER is 3,150 calories. Now, like I said, this particular individual is trying to gain weight so that he can build muscle mass. So what we're going to do is we're going to have to obviously add to this number to get what his total caloric goal is going to be. So I'll put caloric goal here. I get asked a lot how big should the caloric surplus be. The answer is going to come down to whether you're on anabolic steroids or not. Assuming that you're not on anabolic steroids, I generally recommend anywhere from 250 to 300 calories surplus. Any more than that, you risk putting up necessary body fat that you don't really need. So to make things simple, I'm going to say 250 calories here. I don't need to do the math, but I'll do it for you guys. 3,150 calories plus his 250 calories surplus. We'll put him at a goal of about 3,400 calories a day. So now that we know that he's going to need about 3,400 calories a day to gain weight, how are we going to decide where his calories come from and what sources he's going to use? Similarly to the caloric surplus situation, if someone were trying to lose weight in this particular situation, I would subtract 500 calories from this. 500 calories a day, a 500 calorie surplus times 7 days a week is going to be obviously 3,500 calories. A 3,500 calorie deficit is going to equal about 1 pound of fat loss per week. Obviously, if you were to take off 1,000 calories from this and have my client eating 2,150 calories a day, that would be a 7,000 calorie total weekly deficit, which is going to have him at about 2 pounds of fat loss per week. I generally like to have the total caloric surplus somewhere between 3,500 and the 7,000 range, somewhere in there. So they're losing more than a pound, but not quite 2 pounds a week. If they're losing 2 pounds a week, I feel like that's very difficult to keep up in the long term and can generally lead to a client like binging and cheating on their diet, etc., etc. So I like to keep this somewhere between the 500 and the 1,000 caloric deficit range for as long as I can. So they're losing the maximum amount of body fat while at the same time keeping hunger and energy levels at bay. But in this particular case, we're talking about a surplus. If you're on a anabolic steroids, you can probably get away with bumping this caloric surplus up higher, probably closer to 400 to 500. That's just because anabolic steroids and performance-enhancing drugs will allow you to metabolize fat faster and better. So you're more likely to get away with a larger caloric surplus without excessive fat gain if you're on PEDs than you are if you're drug-free. So anyways, now that we know that he's got 3,400 calories, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to figure out where those calories are going to come from. How many calories is he going to get from protein? How many calories is he going to get from carbs? How many calories is he going to get from fats? And what are the sources that we're going to use for all of those? So if you remember my protein video, you heard that I like to keep the protein recommendations somewhere between 1.5 to 1.75 grams of protein per pound of lean body mass. If they're on a diet, like say they're on a contest prep and they're 6% body fat and they're trying to get even leaner, I may bump that up as high as 2 grams of protein per pound of lean body mass. The leaner the individual, the higher the demand for protein and amino acid synthesis in the muscles. The fatter the individual is, for lack of a better term, they don't need quite as much protein, so I may have them closer to the 1.5 body range. Look, guys, there are some pretty scientific ways that you can calculate your body fat levels. You can get like skin calipers, you can go get DEXA scanned or whatever. But to be honest, for starting off, all I do is this. Literally just Google body fat examples men. If you're a woman, do body fat examples women. What you're going to do is you're going to find pictures like this here. And all we're going to do is we're just going to take some examples, some pictures, and compare. So let's say for this example, the individual is somewhere between, let's do this. Let's say the individual is somewhere between 10 to 12% body fat. Usually when I get a range like this, like I get 10 to 12, obviously 10 to 12 is quite a range. That's about 2% body fat. What I like to do in that situation is split the difference. So if they look like they're anywhere between 10% and 12%, I'll just assume that they're in the middle and they're 11%. So how do we figure out their the total amount of lean body mass that they have? Remember that the individual is 165 pounds, and I assume that he's 11% body fat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take his body weight, 165 pounds. Here, I'm going to full screen this so it's easier to see. And I'm going to multiply this by what I believe his body fat percentage to be, which is 11%. And I do this as a decimal, obviously. What this is going to do is this is going to give me 18.15 pounds. What this means, hypothetically, is if this individual were to lose every single pound of body fat that he has on his body and keep every single ounce of muscle, keep every single ounce of intramuscular fluid retention, organ weight, bone density, etc., etc., he's going to lose approximately 18.15 pounds. So what we're going to do to figure out the amount of weight that he needs is we're going to take his total weight and we're going to subtract the fat mass that we just had, which if you remember is this right here, 18.15 pounds. And if that particular individual were to lose every single ounce of body fat that they have on their body, they would weigh approximately 146.85 pounds. Obviously, this is quite the number to work with. What I do in this situation, similarly to the caloric needs, is I'll round this number up or down to an interval of 5, so it's very easy to remember. So instead of going 146.85 pounds, I'm just going to assume that this individual's total lean body mass is 145 pounds. Now to find their protein intake, Remember, 1.5 to 1.75 pounds of protein per pound of lean body mass, which is going to be this number that you see here. Obviously, that's quite the range, 1.5 to 1.75. Very similarly to the body fat, I take both measurements and I just take the average of the two and I split the difference. So 145 times 1.5 is 217.5. And then I take 145 times 1.75 and I get 253.75. So what we're going to do is we're going to add these two numbers together. Here's the 1.5, here's the 1.75, plus 217.5. We're going to divide this by 2 to get the average. We're going to get 235.625 grams of protein. Again, I'm just going to round this down to a number that's easy to remember. We're going to get 235 grams of protein. So let's go back to the spreadsheet here. And we're going to be aiming for 235 grams of protein total. Now, how do we divvy this up throughout the meals? Obviously, if you remember, when I talk about in the protein video, I'm a big fan of taking protein in consistently throughout the day. Personally, anywhere between every 2.5 to 3 hours. So if you're someone who's trying to maximize your muscle protein synthesis, you want to be eating, in my opinion, this is obviously going to depend on how many hours of the day you're awake, but you want to be eating anywhere from 5 to 7 times a day. 235 grams of protein divided by, in this particular case, 6 meals a day. This is common math here. 235 divided by 6 means we're going to be aiming for 39.16 repeating. I'm just going to round this up to an easy number to remember. So what we're going to be aiming for is 40 grams of protein per meal. That's going to be the goal here. 40 grams of protein per meal divided by the 6 meals is going to get us pretty close to this 235 grams of protein total. So now let's figure out the amount of fat that they need. If you remember when I talked back in the fat video, I like to put an individual's total fat intake somewhere between 20 to 25% of their total caloric intake. I like to do this because there's a lot of literature and studies out there that show if your total caloric intake is any less than 20% of your total caloric intake, you run a very high risk for your testosterone being compromised. And testosterone is obviously an extremely critical component to muscle building and physique development. So to figure this out, very similarly to how we did the protein, anywhere between 20 to 25% of your total caloric intake, we're just going to take the two numbers and we're going to find the average here. So remember, his total caloric intake is 3,400 calories. We're going to take this times 20%. This is going to be 680. We'll divide by 9. We'll remember this here, 75. I may round this up to 76. I divided by 9 because there's 9 calories per gram of fat. And then we'll take the 25%, 3,400 times 0.25, 850 divided by 9 is 94. I'm going to round this up to 95 so it's easy to remember. We'll take the 95 from the one extreme plus the 75 from the other extreme, divide it by 2, and you're going to be getting 85 grams of fat per meal, or 85 grams of fat total. Let's put this here. Total. Obviously, we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 meals. Very similarly to the protein, we'll divide this by the total amount of meals. We're going to be getting roughly 14 grams of fat per meal. And now we're going to find the total amount of carbs. Now, if you remember from the carb video, I like to calculate protein first, and then fat second, and then the remainder of the client's total calories are going to come from carbohydrates. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the caloric goal, 3,400 calories, and we're going to subtract from this. We're getting 235 grams of protein. So I'm going to take 235 multiplied by 4 because there's 4 calories per gram of protein. And then we're going to subtract again the 85 grams of fat total, minus 85 times 9, which is going to give us 1,695 calories from carbs. To find out how many carbs that is, we're going to divide that by 4 because there's 4 calories per gram of carbohydrate. And we're going to get 423.75. I'm going to round this up to 425 grams of carbs. And then just like we did with the protein and fat, we're going to take this 425 divided by the 6 meals, and you're going to get about 70 grams of carbs per meal. So what I'll do here is I'll just put 235 protein, 85 fat, and 425 carbs. So this right here, what I just put, I'll bold this for you. This is going to be the total, their macro breakdown. By eating 235 grams of protein, 85 grams of fat, 425 grams of carbs, that's going to give them roughly this 3,400 total calorie goal. Within the 3,400 calories, we've got 6 meals. That's going to be about 40 grams of protein per meal, 14 grams of fat per meal, and 70 grams of carbs per meal. Now, there's going to be certain situations where these numbers are going to differ, and I'll show you guys that when I get there. All right, so now let's actually plan out their meals and what their food sources are going to be. A lot of clients, they prefer that I just give them these numbers here. You need to get 40 grams of protein per meal, 14 grams of fat per meal, and 70 grams of carbs per meal, and I'll let you as the client pick the choices. But for a lot of the clients, specifically the more serious ones, they like to have everything planned out for them that I choose, and they just kind of have to follow it like a robot. So let's assume that our client in this example is going to be like that. So what we need to do is we need to find a calorie database. I prefer MyFitnessPal. The reason I prefer MyFitnessPal is because I've been using MyFitnessPal for probably 4 years. Some other good ones are calorieking.com. I don't really like this one as much, but I do know a lot of people that like to use Calorie King. You can also just straight up use Google. If you Google, say, potatoes nutrition, you can see right here on the right hand side they give you the serving sizes and then the total calorie and nutrient breakdown per. I prefer to use MyFitnessPal just because there are certain ones that are verified, but I also do like Google. I'm not really a fan of Calorie King too much. All right, so let's plan out the meals. I'm going to start with the protein sources first. If you remember the protein sources, the protein sources that I'm a big fan of are eggs, chicken, steak, whey in certain situations, dairy in certain situations. And what I like to do is I like to have these meals differ. So what I've got here is I've got 6 different meals. Each one needs protein, so to me, that gives me 6 different opportunities to give this individual 6 different protein sources. This is really important to me because it lets the individual have different amount of amino acid ratios and profiles with their diet, so they get different kinds of protein qualities per meal. And it also gives them a variety. They're not eating the same thing over and over and over. If 3 out of these 6 meals were chicken, the client in particular would probably feel like they're just in Groundhog Day and they're eating the same thing over and over. Now, in certain situations, say the tail end of prep, that's probably going to be how things are. All 6 of these meals here may be egg whites, or all 6 of these meals here may be 99% turkey, or all 6 of these meals here may be a white fish like cod or tilapia. But generally in an off-season period, I like to give, and even in the early stages of prep, I like to give a lot of variety in the meal so that the client doesn't feel like they're eating the same thing over and over. All right, meal 1, we need 40 grams of protein here. It's important to understand that in meal 1, the client isn't training yet, so he can kind of have whatever he wants here. One pretty basic food that I like to start off people with, and it's pretty easy to start your day off with, is eggs. If you remember from my protein video and my fat video, I'm a big fan of eggs because eggs are very high in HDL cholesterol, which is going to be beneficial to your total testosterone and the production of your free range testosterone. So let's see here, nutrition info. Let's say we got large eggs, obviously extra large, jumbo, yada yada yada, all these different serving sizes. Let's just assume that you're eating large eggs. You see, per egg we get 5 grams of fat and 6 grams of protein. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to give them 4 whole eggs. That'll automatically update. We'll get 19 grams of fat, 25 grams of protein. So let's go here. I'm going to put 4 large eggs. Now, remember from the amount of eggs that there's also 19 grams of fat here. So what I'll do here is I'll put this in parentheses, 19 grams of fat. This is going to be important to us later. When we go to calculate the total amount of fat that they need for their meals. So you got 4 large eggs, which also has 19 grams of fat. Now the 4 large eggs has 25 grams of protein, and remember that we need 40 grams of protein per meal. So what we got to do is we got to get 15 grams of protein from something else. I'm a big fan of egg whites in this situation. Let's just say egg white. We got here eggs, white only, raw. Nutrition info. 1 egg white gives 4 grams of protein. 1 large egg white. So we're going to go 3. That gives us 11. We'll go here. 4 is going to give us 14. That's close enough. So we're going to be getting 39 grams of protein with this meal instead of 40. But again, 1 gram of protein here or 1 gram of carb here isn't really that big of a deal. So on top of the 4 large eggs, we're also going to be having 4 large egg whites. And that's going to be our protein source for meal 1. So now we've got meal 2, which is going to be the pre-workout meal. What kind of protein source do we want here in this particular situation? We want something that's going to be easily digestible. We can use whey here if you choose. I prefer to use whey in the post-workout window. But I'm also a fan of taking in whey pre-workout. It's ultimately up to you. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to assume that the client has a lot of money and he's got enough money to consistently buy whey protein and have it where it is in abundance to him. Whey protein can get kind of expensive, but that's just kind of the price that we pay as bodybuilders. Now, obviously, the macro breakdown for your particular whey is going to depend on the one that you buy. So unless there's a specific whey that I recommend to you, like you have to use this whey, what I'm just going to put here is I'm going to put 40 grams protein from, and I prefer isolate from whey isolate. Oh, isolate. And this is going to be the same thing in the post-workout meal. So pre and post, he's getting 40 grams of protein from whey isolate. He's going to have to do the math on his end on how many grams on the scale and everything that is to get the 40 grams of protein. It's going to depend on the whey that you use. Some whey proteins have 30 grams of protein per scoop, some have 20. So what you're going to have to do is do the math and figure that out for yourself. So now we've got 4 more meals left. 1, 2, 3, 4, or no, 3 meals left. Meals 4, 5, and 6. So at this point, what are we missing? We're missing a red meat meal, we're missing a dairy meal, and we're missing a poultry meal. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the red meat meal here. Now, red meat is obviously going to depend on what red meat you use. In my particular case, I prefer ground sirloin more so than ground beef. Again, from the protein video, ground beef is a mixture of ground sirloin, ground round, and ground chuck. Me personally, I just prefer to pick one of those 3 and go with it. I personally prefer sirloin the best. I think it tastes the best and is probably the most beneficial to you as an athlete. So depending on how lean you get your sirloin is going to depend obviously on its macro breakdown. Me personally, I have a grocery store where I can buy 95% ground sirloin. So I'll put that in here. Now, we need 40 grams of protein from sirloin. I'm going to change this to 1 ounce instead of 4. So we see per ounce, we get 6 grams of protein. So we're going to do 6 ounces. Actually, we're going to do, let's try 6.5. 6.5, no, maybe not. 6.5. 6.5 will give us 39 grams of protein. That's pretty close to the 40. I'll take it. So now, it's very important that you understand when you use a calorie database, unless you specifically identify that you are using cooked weight for your protein source, you need to put in here that you're using, say, cooked ground sirloin. But when we're looking at these particular macro breakdowns here, this is going to be for 6.5 ounces of raw ground sirloin. And you need to understand that the majority of proteins, specifically poultry and red meat, they shrink by 75% after you cook them. So if you take a 6.5 ounce patty of 95% lean ground sirloin and you weigh it raw, it's going to weigh 6.5 ounces. But after you cook it and you weigh it, it's going to be less than 6.5 ounces because the water has evaporated out of it. So to figure out how much this is cooked, what we're going to do, I prefer to weigh everything in grams. I think grams is easier to track instead of ounces. So if we've got 6.5 ounces of raw sirloin, I know that there are 28 grams in 1 ounce. So what we're just going to do is we're going to take the 6.5 ounces and we're going to convert that to grams. So that's going to be 182 grams of raw sirloin. To figure out how much this is cooked, again, it shrinks by 75%, so we're just going to multiply by 0.75. Obviously, that's 75% as a decimal. You can multiply it by 3 and then divide it by 4, but I just prefer to do it as a decimal. Going to get 136.5 here. Again, I like to round up or round down so it's easy to remember. In the case of protein, I tend to round up just to be on the safe side. So what we're going to do here is go back to the database. And this is going to be 140 grams of 95% ground sirloin, and that's cooked weight. And it's important that I specify that that's cooked weight. I tend to give everybody weights in cooked weight because not everybody has the freedom to work from home where they can cook every meal fresh. So what they do, and what I do too, is just cook everything in bulk, do like a meal prep where I cook like 6 pounds of sirloin in a week, put it in a big Tupperware and put it in the fridge so I don't have to cook each meal fresh. I can just pull it out of the refrigerator and then microwave it. So 140 grams of 95% ground sirloin cooked is going to give us close to the 40 grams of protein per meal. Now here we need a poultry meal. I do like to include poultry at least once a day. We can do turkey or chicken. In this particular case, we're going to do chicken breast just because I think that chicken breast is the most cost effective and it tastes by far the best. Oh, all right. We're going to figure out that I forgot something here. With the sirloin, this is real and raw. I'm not going back and editing this. 6.5 ounces. Very similarly to the what is going on? Real and raw, guys. No editing here. 95% ground sirloin. 1 ounce. 6.5 ounces is going to be about 10 grams of fat. So also, I'm going to put this here, 10 fat. Scoot this over so it's easier to see. 10 grams of fat. Now, chicken breast for meal 5. Chicken breast. A lot of these are going to be a specific brand. Breast raw. I like to use the ones that have the green check marks because that means they're verified by the USDA. So, nutrition info. 100 grams of cooked chicken breast gives us 23 grams of protein. What I'm going to do to make this easy is convert this to ounces. Come on, update for me. So 6 ounces of raw chicken breast is going to give us 39 grams of protein, just like we did with the sirloin. 6 ounces raw times 28 grams in an ounce would be 168 grams of raw chicken breast. We're going to multiply this by 75%. 126, we'll round this up to 130 grams chicken breast cooked weight. This also is going to have some fat in it, even though it's very little. It's going to have 2 grams of fat in it, but I do count that. 2 grams of fat. And then finally, we come to the last meal. I do like to include a dairy, a source of dairy protein, casein protein here, if I can, if the client isn't lactose intolerant. My personal favorite source of dairy protein is going to be some non-fat Greek yogurt. I prefer the plain, the shit that tastes like sour cream. But that's obviously an individual one. I think if you get the vanillas or the ones that are flavored, they have a bunch of sugar in it, and I would just rather have the plain non-fat Greek yogurt. If you get a tub of non-fat Greek yogurt and you look at the ingredients, the only ingredient that's in it is milk. So that's the way that I like to go. Greek non-fat yogurt, let's see, Kirkland. You don't want that. Walmart, 1 cup, 120 calories. I'm trying to get this in something where it's easy to weigh. All right, let's do this. Greek non-fat yogurt. We'll do 1 ounce. Again, we need 40 grams of protein here. So it looks like we're going to need 20 ounces. Oh, that's not right. Bad math, Caidin. 18. 17. All right, 17 ounces of Greek yogurt is going to give us the 40 grams of protein. Again, I like to weigh everything in grams. So we're going to take the 17 ounces times 28 grams an ounce. It's 476 grams. That's a shitload of Greek yogurt if you've ever weighed out your Greek yogurt. So we're going to round this down to something that's easy to remember. 475 grams of non-fat Greek yogurt. Now, the non-fat Greek yogurt is going to have some carbs in it. We're going to get 28 grams of carbs for that. So I will put that in parentheses here, just like I did with the fat. 28 carbs. All right. So now we have each meal that has the protein source figured out. And in an ideal situation, I wouldn't have 2 meals here that have the same amount of the same protein source. I would maybe try to get like turkey or something in here. But in this case, we're just going to go with whey isolate. Okay, so now let's get the carb source. So we need 70 grams of carbs per meal. But one thing that's important to consider as we get to 70 grams of carbs per meal is that meal 6 already has 28 grams of carbs in it from the Greek yogurt. So we can't add 70 grams of carbs here because that's going to put us at 98 grams of carbs per meal, which is obviously not ideal. Now, I do like to put some carbs in the last meal of the day, but I do think that 70 grams of carbs right before bed may be not a good idea for some people. Carbs, there's a lot of research taking in carbs before bed will reduce your cortisol levels, which will help you recover better and get some better sleep. But I think in this particular case, we're going to keep the carbs where they are for the for meal 6. We're just going to do the 28 grams that are in the Greek yogurt, and then good one, Caidin. And then we're just going to do we're going to take the rest of the carbs. So we get 70 grams of carbs per meal. There's already 28 grams of carbs in there, so we get 42. And what we're going to do is we're going to take those extra 42 carbs that we now have off to the side, and we're going to add them to the pre- and post-workout meals. I think that having more carbs in your pre- and post-workout meal is a good way to improve performance and recovery in the gym. So we need to keep a mental note that we've got 42 grams of carbs to play with in here. So we're going to go ahead and fill this, and we're not going to have any carbs with this particular meal. So meal 1, we need 70 grams of carbs. I am a huge fan of rice, if you remember from my carb video. White rice in particular, I think that brown rice tastes terrible, and I think that it tastes, again, terrible, and it has a lot of nutrients in it that have been shown to be bad for digestion. And digestion for me is obviously very important. So I get this question a lot, is like, how do I weigh rice? And in an ideal situation, you would be weighing your rice raw and cooking it fresh in a rice cooker every time. But again, very similar to the protein, not all of us have that luxury. So what I do, and it's important that you understand, when you look at the USDA's measurements of rice, they assume that you are cooking the rice in a 2-to-1 water to rice ratio. So that means for every cup of dry rice you put in your rice cooker, you're adding 2 cups of water. If you obviously put in 1 cup of water per 1 cup of rice, the weights are going to be different than what the USDA says, because their measurements are based off of 2 cups of water per 1 cup of rice. So we're going to do white rice, glutinous, cooked. Let's see what's a good one. Again, just like the protein, I like to get everything in the cooked measurement, because the majority of us are going to prep everything way in advance and then do it later. So 100 grams of rice, because I like to weigh everything in grams. 100 grams of rice is 21 grams of carbohydrates. So we need 70 carbs. So we're going to need 300 grams, which will give us 63. Let's try 3.2, which will give us 67. Let's try 3.4. 3.4 is 72. So 3.4 times 100 grams means in this particular meal, we're going to have 340 grams of rice cooked weight. Now, I know with these 2 meals here, we're going to be doing rice as well. I'm a huge fan of rice. It's very cheap, very easy to digest, and I just like eating the same thing over and over. So I know with these 2 meals, we're also going to have 340 grams of rice, and we're also going to have 340 grams of rice with the chicken meal. So we've got rice in 3 meals. One thing that I do like personally is when I eat my red meat meal, whether it's steak, I do sometimes like to have potatoes. So what I like to do, and if you're a client of mine, you know, is I don't limit you to just what this says here. I give you some options. So for example, meal 4, 340 grams of rice, but I also want to get 70 grams of carbs from potatoes, so that the client has options. 1 medium, no one knows what medium is, so again, I like to weigh everything in grams. For potatoes, this is going to be raw weight, so we get 26 grams of carbs per 100 grams. So 200 grams would be 52. Let's try 2.75. That'd be 75 or 72 grams of carbs. 2.75 times 100 grams, which means to get 70 grams of carbs, they can have 340 grams of cooked rice or 275 grams of potato. Now that's cooked, or that's raw weight. I'll put this down here as well. So with these 2 meals, they don't have to do rice. They can do potato if they choose. It's just important that they know if they're going to do potato, it's 275 grams of raw potato. If they do rice, it's 340 grams of cooked rice. So now with the pre and post workout meals, I'm a big fan of cream of rice here. Reason I like cream of rice is because cream of rice is easy to digest, and it doesn't sit in your stomach as much as white rice does, because you can control how much water you put in it. So cream of rice. Cream of rice cereal. We don't want a cup. We need something that's got some grams in it. Cream of rice, 45 grams dry. Will give us 36 grams of carbs. So we'll just take 2. Oh, not 20, 2. So 72 grams of carbs is going to take us 90 grams of cream of rice. So I'm going to put 90 grams cream of rice. That's raw weight. And we're going to do 90 grams of cream of rice as well. Now, that isn't all of our carbs. Remember that we still have 42 grams of carbs from here that are up to, because we're not adding carbs in the last meal, we still have 42 grams of carbs that we can add. So what I like to do in the pre and post workout meal is include some type of fruit, pre and post workout. 42 grams of carbs divided by 2 means that I get an extra 20 grams of carbs per each of these meals that I can do from fruit. I'm a big fan of bananas. Again, if you remember the carb video, we'll see one medium banana is 29 grams of carbs. So let's see what a small banana is. Small banana is roughly 23 grams of carbs. So to get the total amount of carbs that we need, we're going to take 90 grams of cream of rice, and we're also going to add 1 small banana, and then we're going to do the same thing down here. So now we have the protein and the carbs for each of the meals filled out. So now let's add the fat. Remember that we have 85 grams of fat total, but we have these particular meals right here that have the fat that's already added to them from the meat or the eggs in this particular case. So let's do this here. So we get 85 grams of fat total, but we've already taken up 19 from the eggs. We've already taken up 10 from the sirloin, and we've already taken up 2 from the chicken breast. So that gives us 54 grams of fat that we can divide up between these 6 meals. I already know in this case that I'm not going to add any more fat to the egg meal because it already has almost 20 grams of fat in it. So we're going to do no fat here, and we're not going to do any fat in the post-workout meal. Reason we're not going to do any fat in the post-workout meal is because fat slows digestion, and we want the fat intake on the post-workout meal to be as low or non-existent as possible. Because what that's going to do is that's going to allow our muscles to and our body to digest the protein and the carbs as fast as possible without having the fat interfere with that. So what we do is we've got 54 grams of fat, but we've only got 4 meals that we're going to be adding fat to. Simple math here. Oh boy, 54 divided by 4. So we're going to be adding 13.5 grams of fat per meal. So we're going to round this. We're actually going to round this down, and we're going to do 13 grams of fat per each of these meals. Now with these 2 meals, because we've got a rice and a meat meal, what I like to do is I like to just do an oil in this case, whether it be avocado oil, macadamia nut oil, olive oil, coconut oil, grapeseed oil. What we're going to end, so we're going to add oils to these 2 meals. I don't think that adding oil to whey protein and cream of rice is going to be very good on the stomach, and I don't think that adding oil to Greek yogurt is going to taste very good. So we're going to add oil to these 2 meals. Remember that oils are liquids, so we measure liquids in milliliters. We don't measure liquids in grams or ounces or anything like that. So with each of these meals, to get 13 grams of fat, we're going to need 13 milliliters of an oil, and I'll put in here olive, macadamia nut, etc. And we're going to do the same thing for this meal. The general rule is 1 milliliter of oil is 1 gram of fat. And then for the pre and post-workout meals, one thing that I do like is nut butters. So another general rule for nut butters is let's do natural peanut butter. $32 grams gives us 16 grams of fat. So what this does, to me, 32 grams of of product gives us 16 grams of fat. To me, that means for every 2 grams of product here, we get 1 gram of fat. So if I need 13 grams of fat from a nut butter, that's going to take 26 grams of product because it's going to be 2 to 1, the product to the actual fat content. 26 grams of nut butter. And I'll put in here almond, peanut butter, cashew butter, etc. And then we're going to get the same thing with the final meal. So now what we've got here is every single meal 1 through 6 has its protein source, every single meal 1 through 6 has its carb source, and every single meal 1 through 6 has his fat source if he's adding fat to it. In the case of meal 1 and the post-workout meal, he's not adding any fat to this meal. So we've got the total meal plan here that he's going to be following. Miscellaneous, I just put here if they're going to add salt to the meal. Like for example, in the post-workout meal, I'll have them add 5 grams of creatine monohydrate. This is just for creatine is obviously one of the most important supplements for bodybuilding. I may do a video on creatine later. I do like to add salt to a lot of these meals, particularly the pre-workout meal. So I may say 3 grams. I like Himalayan pink sea salt. I'm going to make another video on sodium and why you should be consuming heavy amounts of sodium, especially if you're very serious about your performance. I don't think that salt in the Greek yogurt would taste very good, so I don't put salt in here. But every meal that I can salt, I do like to weigh the salt, so I'm getting a consistent amount with each meal. We're going to add salt to the Himalayan pink sea salt. We're going to add salt to the post-workout meal because sodium is an electrolyte. And if you're like me and you sweat like a whore in church while you're training, you want to replenish what you're losing during the training. So we've got salt in meals 1 through 5, not doing it in the last meal of the day just because it wouldn't taste that good. And we're getting creatine monohydrate in each of the meals. If they're doing vegetables with each meal, I'll put vegetables in here as well. Like I may do 3 grams of pink Himalayan sea salt plus 100 grams asparagus. If they're doing vegetables, the majority of people in the off season aren't doing vegetables, so I just leave them here. A lot of people close to the contest are doing vegetables because they need something to fill their stomach and keep them full because their carbs and fats are so low. Other than that, guys, that's really how I figure out a meal plan for somebody and how you guys can figure out a meal plan for yourself. Obviously, you're going to have to tweak the numbers, tweak the EER, tweak the height, weight, etc., activity level, depending on you individually. But you can pretty much just do what I did and figure out how to make a basic meal plan for yourself. That's really all you need to do is know how to do some math and have some willpower to be able to stick to the diet. All right, guys, thanks for watching. If you're interested in coaching, again, my link is in the description below. Other than that, have a good one, guys. Stay tuned for more videos. I got plenty more ideas of stuff that I can use and stuff that I can make, so stay tuned.